And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, January 8th, 2024, 7 EST, and thank you for joining me for a brand new episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. And you heard me, that's right, the first episode of 2024. Took around 2 weeks off to celebrate Christmas, celebrate New Year's. I hope you all had a fantastic holiday season. I personally did, saw a lot of movies. Shout out to my brother. He actually got me this really cool mug. It says Cinemaster's Reviews, our show's logo. So shout out to Jack. Really awesome gift. But yeah, we have an exciting show planned for you tonight. First, we are going to be reviewing the first 2024 movie of the year, that being Night Swim, as well as a 2023 release that got a wider release this year in All of Us Strangers. I say we jump right into the show. Throat's already getting used to reviewing again. But yeah, I say we jump right into our show with our first review, that being Night Swim. This is a new horror film directed by Brian Maguire. This follows an ex-baseball player played by Wyatt Russell who had to retire early due to him getting a chronic illness in his legs that essentially made him just unable to play baseball. Everyone thought he was going to be one of the great players. He played for the Milwaukee Brewers, and for some reason he just illness hit him, and he can't seem to heal. His family moves into a new house, and they have a new pool, and he is recommended to do a pool therapy. As he slowly starts getting into this pool, he starts to realize that even though it's starting to heal him, and he seems to be going into remission with his injuries, strange things starts happening with this family due to this haunted pool. So what's going on? Are there ghosts? Who knows? It's a Blumhouse horror movie. You might be able to tell that. Blumhouse is known for taking these really simple concepts and making these cheap these horror movies on the cheap that eventually are able to turn somewhat of a profit, honestly, regardless of the quality. And if I were to look at the main issues with this movie, I think me describing it should tell you what the main issue of this movie is, and that is the fact that you have a horror movie, which is a movie that is intending to scare you, intending to put you in a manner of suspense, and it's about a haunted swimming pool, which in general, as a concept in full, is just silly and is tough to really get behind. I appreciate the fact that it adds all this lore to this swimming pool, where you learn that the pool was built over a healing spring, and that's why the water has the ability to heal people, which is silly because when they find the pool, they end up draining the pool, they end up cleaning it. So it's not the actual pool that causes bad things to happen, but it's the actual water, which doesn't really make a whole ton of sense when they're draining it. But at the end of the day, this is a very silly concept, and I don't want to fault a movie based on its concept alone, because I think a lot of great movies often have the ability to go above their silly concepts. But this is just one that I just could not find myself being able to take seriously, because it's about a haunted pool, and it keeps on trying to remind you that it's about a haunted pool by adding so much backstory to this pool and adding so much lore and making you really get into the previous owners of the house, what they used the water to heal. And at the end of the day, it just comes off as very, very silly. One of the other major faults of this movie, maybe the biggest plight on modern day horror movies in general, is the state of jump scares and the amount of jump scares in this movie. If you ever hear horror experts talk, they'll often say that jump scares are the cheapest way to get a quick scare out of someone, where just where just something will just immediately jump out at the audience and in a sense to like get some sort of reaction. Oftentimes it's not even like a threatening thing. It'll just be like a character will show up and a music cue will hit, and that's how the movie is going to get a quick scare out of you. And no, this movie just has, even more than most horror movies now, this movie has some of the most jump scares I think I've seen in a recent horror movie as of late. Like in the first half hour alone, and this is a 90-minute movie, I counted 4 jump scares, which is excessive. It's annoying, especially when you're in the first when you're in the first 30 minutes, you don't really have like the big scary things that are happening at this point. So they really do just feel cheap. One instance, for example, I'm thinking there's a scene where the mom, played by Carrie Condon, I don't know what she was doing in this movie. She got an Oscar nomination 2 years ago at this point for The Banshees of Inisherin, and she's wonderful in that movie. She's in this film. The movie gives her nothing to do. It's such a thankless, like, wife role. It just comes off as, like, you could have gotten anyone for this part. Why would you write this incredibly underdeveloped role for an actress as talented as Carrie Condon? Boggles my mind. But there's a scene where she goes to the fridge. She's looking for food. She's opening. She closes it, and her kid's standing right there where he wasn't originally, and then you just get a sound cue, and the mom just jumps for a second. That is the level of scares we get in the first 30 minutes, and I guess it gets a little bit more effective towards the end. It gets a little bit more creative, but man, for the most part, every time a jump scare happens, it just feels completely unearned and feels completely unwarranted. I will give one cast member of this movie credit. Wyatt Russell plays the dad. He is the one that is trying to heal from his injuries, wants to get back to his career as a baseball player. He gets a job coaching his son's baseball team, and I think he is doing a lot in a role that doesn't have a ton. Actually, I'm gonna take that back. It does actually have quite a bit, because his character does start changing a bit throughout the movie. Without getting into too many spoilers, as he starts going in the water and as he starts healing from his injuries, the water essentially begins to control him, like, mentally. And every member of the family starts to realize that he's not acting the same, and he might be seeming a little bit more what's the word? A little bit more like hyper fixated on, oh no, like I understand our kids might be seeing ghosts in this pool, but I believe that this pool is healing me, so therefore we can't we can't get rid of it. As the movie goes on, his character goes into some really dark places, and I think Wyatt Russell actually does a really, really good job at getting to those places, making this character seem interesting to a point where, even though this movie does have such a silly concept, I think his character and the conflict that his character serves of, I want to continue following my dreams as a baseball player, but clearly that is putting my family in danger. I think us as an audience member, the movie does a good job at having us invested in that element of the film. Yeah, I just wanted to get into, like, as the movie goes on and as we learn why the pool has these powers, I think the adding of the lore and, like, this movie opens up with, like, a scene from the past when we see the previous family that lived in this house and what this pool did to them. I think it just makes it seem like an even sillier concept. And at the end of the day, this is like a horror movie, so, like, I don't want to get too mad at, like, a silly concept, because it's obviously not in a sense of reality. But I just think by the end, with as much as, like, it really, like, makes it feel like this is a dungeon master writing lore for this object, but instead it's a director writing lore for this haunted swimming pool. I just think it came off as very, very silly, and it just never had me that invested. The climax of the film, I will give it that it does have some intense moments. Without spoiling too much, certain characters are literally, like, pulled down into the water, and the depth of the pool that we thought ended at the concrete, it just continues to keep going after that, and we have characters diving down to the pool, and, like, there's not a ton of light, so it's really hard to see. But that's the issue. Is I understand that when they go underwater, and during this point where you're supposed to be a little bit more uncomfortable, a little bit more claustrophobic, but I could not see really anything, and there are things that are supposed to be happening to the character that is trying to rescue certain characters, and it just came off as like aggravating and annoying as a movie watcher while I was watching this scene. And yeah, I just could not get invested in what could have been this really intense climax of the film. I just couldn't get invested because I just really couldn't see anything, because I just think the filmmakers made an artistic choice that just didn't really pay off. I will give the ending of like the very ending of the movie credit on two things. One, it comes down to a character making a fairly big dramatic choice, and I think with everything the movie had gotten to, there are certain things in the climax that do work outside of the pool, and I think due to that, the movie does make me care about the final decision that's made. And also, again, without getting into too heavy spoilers, the ending of this movie has a decision that's made where you can't really make a sequel to this movie. And considering what seems like every single Blumhouse movie is really going to try and get like a quick sequel in the works due to these movies being so cheap and they can very easily turn a profit, the fact that this movie ends where there's really no way you can seriously continue the story, I think was a fairly bold move by the filmmakers and a fairly bold move by the producers to let the filmmakers do that. So I will applaud that. Who knows if this movie does well, and maybe they'll just find a way to completely retcon that ending to the point where, oh, but we can make another Haunted Swimming Pool movie, in which case completely disregard everything I said. But yeah, I will give credit where credit is due. The ending of this movie is actually fairly unique because of how confident the filmmaker is to say, no, this is the one story I wanted to tell, and I don't need to continue it. We're going to have an ending point right here. Going into final grades here at Cinemaster's Review. If you ever watched us, we rate movies on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, 0 being absolutely atrocious, and 10 being an absolutely incredible piece of filmmaking. I'm going to go right in the middle, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I think this is just a completely run-of-the-mill horror movie with nothing too new that you've seen. It relies too much on cliches, and it doesn't get over its really silly premise. You have one pretty impressive performance, but it does not save the movie as much as Wyatt Russell is trying. This is not a movie I think you need to go see in theaters. This is your typical January horror movie. Usually in January, most people are usually just catching up on the Oscar movies or other big movies that came out in the holiday season. And studios are like, well, we still need to put out newer movies, so you get just like cheaper horror movies, cheaper action movies that just get put out around this time. And this is the textbook example of that. Nowhere near the worst January horror movies I've ever seen. But yeah, just nothing special. You don't need to go see this in theaters. If you catch it on streaming or on cable when it comes out, it's not going to be the worst experience, but this is one that you don't really need to watch. But yeah, I say we jump right into our second review of the night, and that being All of Us Strangers, directed by Andrew Hogg. Andrew Hogg is someone who's directed a lot of like quieter indie movies. The past is the guy that did Weekend. He did 45 Years. He did Lean on Pete, which is a movie Lean on Pete's the only one of those movies that I've seen. I think it's okay, nothing great, but definitely shows that Andrew Hogg has a way of showing bonds between certain characters, and I think he does a really, really great job here at doing that. This movie follows a lonely man played by Andrew Scott who lives alone in London, England. One day, someone who lives in his apartment complex just says, knocks on his door and asks him, hey, I've noticed you looking at me a lot from down the street. Do you live alone? He says, yeah, and they form a connection. We learn that Andrew Scott's parents have passed away when he was a child, but we see scenes where his character does interact with his parents, but not in like flashbacks. You see him interact, and this isn't a spoiler. This is shown very early on. We see his character interact with his parents' ghosts, played by Jamie Bell and Claire Foy. The major element I want to shout out of this movie, I think Andrew Scott is incredible. I think Andrew Scott's someone, if you've seen Sherlock, he played Moriarty. If you've seen Spectre, he played C. If you've seen Fleabag, he played the Hot Priest. I think Andrew Scott is one of the more underrated actors we have working today, and I love that Andrew Scott gave him this vehicle to essentially show off how great of an actor he is. And I just think he carries so much in his face, and he carries so much melancholy in his eyes that every time he's on screen, even if he's not saying something, you see how like broken down this character is, and how broken down Andrew Scott is portraying this person. Whenever he talks with Paul Mescal's character, as they slowly begin to form more of a connection and then eventually fall in love. You see the scenes where he talks with his mom. I think there's one scene in this movie where Scott talks with Claire Foy's character, his mom, and it completely ripped my heart out. This is a very emotional movie. If you have lost a parent or if you have lost a loved one, I think what this movie has to say about moving on but still remembering why these people mean so much to you. I think this is just one of those movies that really, really made me feel something in the end. And I think a lot don't get me wrong, a lot of that had to do with Andrew Hogg's direction, a lot of that had to do with the script, but I think the majority of the reason why this movie works is due to the fact that Andrew Scott is so good. We are going into Oscar season right now. I really hope the Academy does not forget about this performance, because I would say this is one of the 5 best male lead actor performances of the year, and everything he does in this movie really, really tugs at your heartstrings to make this a really emotional film. Another thing I wanted to talk about, the way this movie makes London look is beautiful. Like, the first shot of this movie is just Andrew Scott just sort of leaning on his window, and you see the cityscape of London, and it just looks gorgeous. Like, whenever a movie can really capture like the nightlife time of like urban areas, I really, really love it, and it just puts me in like a calming mood in a way, and that's what this movie does. Another thing that really put me in a calming mood was the score by, I hope I pronounced this name right, Emile Lavinez Faroche. I apologize if I butchered that name, but the score by them is absolutely incredible. It's a very sad score. It's not a super like uplifting score, but it's one that you'll remember after you've watched the movie. It feels melodic in a way, just the way how it completely understates certain scenes. The final shot of this movie is one I'm going to remember, not just because it's an incredible image to end the movie on, but just because of how beautiful the music is that is playing underneath the score. The actual storytelling of this movie, like I said, this movie is not told in like a flashback point of view with the way Andrew Scott's character talks with his parents, but this movie is described as a fantasy movie on IMDb. I'm not sure I would describe it as that, but a lot of the movie does come down to the fact of like you're going inside of Andrew Scott's character's head, and you're wondering like, is this person all right? Like, is this person mentally there? And I think as the movie just goes on, one, I love that it doesn't give any like, it doesn't put any judgment on this character by saying like, oh, this person's crazy, because he's having such vivid images of these people that aren't there. But I definitely think the place the movie goes of showing how like when you do lose someone at such a young age, and when someone means so much to you and you're just no longer there, how that can just go on to define you as a person, and how you can eventually move on from that, I think is really, really beautiful. And I do like how the story really gets down to that. The ending of this movie is still one that I'm still trying to tackle with. This is an ending that does not leave you with a lot of answers, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I would be lying if I said this is one of those times where I kind of did, in a way, kind of want an answer, because I think just the question it reveals towards the end is so big and so crazy that I was like, this is just feels insane to just reveal this in the last 5 minutes. To the point where I think it could have been handled maybe a little better from the filmmakers. Without getting too much into it, it's revealed that going on as you're watching the movie, you can kind of see something like this happening. But I think the fact that it's just revealed out of nowhere, I think just feels a little strange to me and definitely took me out of the film a bit at the end. The only other major negative I have with this movie is there's kind of a chunk in the movie where you have the scenes of Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal's character just interacting and going out to clubs and getting high and everything. And there's very little dialogue there. And I think the movie just kind of gets into like a wandering mood in a way where it kind of takes a little bit of time for the movie to really get back on track from that point to getting to the stuff where Andrew Scott's character, as you see, is still reckoning with the fact that his parents died. The scenes with him and Mescal are not bad by any means. I think Paul Mescal is also an incredible actor, one of the best young actors I think we have working today. But I think watching, but I do think there was a chunk in the middle where I think the movie just kind of lost its purpose and was just kind of questioning like, hey, what are we doing here? Do we need to get back to the plot? And as a moviegoer, you do kind of feel that as you're watching it. Yeah, those are really the only negatives I have about this movie. If I were to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to give it a great score of an 8 out of 10. I think this is a really, really lovely film. Very quiet film that still stays with you. Some incredible performance, especially its lead performance, I think is excellent. If you have the time to see this in theaters, I would highly recommend you go see it. It's one that is it's a super emotional film. As you said, it tugs on the theme of losing loved ones really, really well. But I think this is one that is definitely worth seeing if you have the time to see it in theaters. But yeah, that actually brings us to the end of our show. Thank you all for joining me for the first episode of 2024. A little bit of housekeeping for next week. As much as I would love to have another show next week, I unfortunately cannot. I cannot do another episode of Cinemasters Reviews because slight announcement. This is going to be the last episode that I record in my in this room and in my parents' house. I'm actually going to be moving out this Friday, and it's going to be taking a big chunk of my time, and I don't think I'll be able to review. I'll even be able to see 2 movies next weekend, so I don't think I'll be able to do a show. But yeah, unfortunately won't be able to do another episode of Cinemasters Reviews next week, but exciting news is that in 2 weeks I will be coming to you from a brand new location. Really excited for 2024 in general. I loved where 2023 took Cinemasters Reviews in our debut year, and I'm really excited to see where the show goes forward. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. It really helps grow our channel a lot. Shout out to Nazario and Cody and Mark and the rest of the panel for the Hit Stick. They've been doing football analysis every single week, and they're going right to the playoffs. So I did want to shout them out. I believe we're the only shows right now that have consistent weekly schedules. But yeah, thank you all for joining me. This has been an exciting review. This has been an exciting show. See you in 2 weeks. And remember, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.